was it?
Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
And next Thursday, that is the 24th of January, we're going to be in the Sugar Club in Dublin to preview the Dublin Racing Festival. And we're going to have an all-star lineup from the world of racing and beyond. I think the beyond part takes Kevin Kilban into the picture, who is here beside me for the football show. But we'll also have Niall Quinn, Nicky English, Davy Russell, Rachel Blackmore, Patrick Mullins alongside Kevin, myself, Johnny Ward, Ger Gilroy and John Duggan, and we'll be looking ahead to a massive weekend taking place at Leopardstown Racecourse on the 2nd and 3rd of February, where top jockeys and trainers will be competing in 14 races, including 8 Grade 1s for €1.8 million in prize money. It's an exclusive off-air event, so the only way to enjoy it is to be there on the night. And tonight we have been given tickets away. We asked how many times has Davy Russell been the Irish champion jockey, and the answer is 3. And congratulations to... Are you from Waterford? You're getting a bit excited? Michael O'Halloran, who has won a pair of VIP tickets to that show next Thursday. And it's all with thanks to the Dublin Racing Festival at Leopardstown Racecourse on Saturday the 2nd and Sunday the 3rd of February. Get your tickets for the festival now at www.leopardstown.com. Nick English always reminds me when I hear about him. When I was working in Setanta back in the day, Kevin, there was a receptionist and she sent up a kind of a call to the top office, which where all the journalists was, and she said, "There's someone here. He's a Nicky English, I think." And like I was just thinking, you're in the wrong game. Like, you know, Nicky English is one of the greatest sporting icons that ever.
I know Nicky quite well.
Loves his racing.
Yeah. I first met Nicky. He's good friends with Niall Quinn. So I first met him probably late 90s, early 2000s. He used to come over to Sunderland games. So.
Good lad.
I had a couple of nights out with him once or twice, Johnny. You know,
couple of nights, once or twice.
Well, a few nights out with him. Let's just say that. Yeah.
We've plenty to discuss on the show. We're going to talk about Nottingham Forest and obviously Martin O'Neill with Daniel Storey, who's not only an erudite football journalist, but also actually a fan of Forest. And Rob Harris will be on then to discuss the Brexit implications following the, as expected, failure of Theresa May's vote to go through. But the biggest Brexit bombshell, arguably, has actually come on Twitter. I'm trying to look for your tweet, Kev. What was the gist of it?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, you do. You put it up about half an hour ago. You essentially espoused the notion of United Ireland coming out of the... if there's one good thing to... thanks to Shane here, he's going to help me out. If there's one good thing to come out of Brexit, then surely it's United Ireland, hashtag 32 counties, and a further...
Did I tweet? Someone must have hacked my Twitter account.
And
Johnny,
a further
surely.
incendiary tricolour. Kev, this is dangerous territory.
Is it?
It is. I think...
Do you not want that?
I do want it. I think Brexit will...
I think it's going to accelerate it. But
definitely accelerate it.
I don't want Brexit. My children live over in the UK, I'm thinking of their futures as well. But
would you want Brexit if it brought about a United Ireland?
No, not really. Well, my only point is if there is something good to come of it, then of course that'd be it. Of course that's what you know. I would have been drummed into me since I was a baby, since I was a kid. So that's of course that's what I would want. Yeah.
I never thought you were the victim of propaganda since you were young. All right, you were a little bit hardcore.
Oh, I've been brainwashed.
I think it will actually accelerate United Ireland, and I think something that looked almost dead in the water has now become a very much reality, and especially with the northern economy being pretty much an economic basket case that's been propped up by the London government for years, and with the success of the southern economy, it may be quite some time off, but I think it's a lot more realistic.
We are actually a sports show, but we do know that there will be repercussions for a lot of young Irish players.
Yeah, and even for racing.
Football, yeah, exactly, without a doubt.
They didn't think of the Grand National when they voted for Brexit. Irish horses gone over week in, week out, day in, day out. And what this could mean, we'll talk about this later on, what this could mean for Irish football is actually quite profound, even though we're speculating.
So many different sports. We know that. There's going to be big changes ahead if we don't see a revolt, that is, anyway.
Yeah, and I don't know, we'll see where it goes. Theresa May probably has a lot more to think about than football at the moment. Yeah. But I don't know, it's profoundly interesting for us anyway. And now I've been hearing today, Martin O'Neill has rejoined Nottingham Forest, the club with which he won back-to-back European Cups as a player. Not that he ever mentioned it. He's become Forest's 11th manager since June 2011. Pretty insane stuff. And there are rumours that Roy Keane is set to join him at the City Ground after their incredibly successful tenure with the Republic of Ireland, which ended in etc., etc. But anyway, on the line with us right now to discuss what's going on in Nottingham is Nottingham-based football journalist Daniel Storey. And Daniel, you are very welcome to the show. Are you as shocked as we were to hear this news today?
I am slightly shocked, yeah. I mean, Martin has been linked with the Nottingham Forest job pretty much every time. Him and Nigel Clough tend to be linked in the kind of second wave of appointments. If the first choice doesn't come off, we then hear those names come in, and he's always stayed away from it very deliberately. He's always talked about Brian Clough's influence, but for whatever reason, it's just not worked out. It does seem a slightly strange time for it to happen now. He's not managed in the Football League since 1996, and it's going to be really interesting to see how he gets on. But there are a number of problems at Nottingham Forest that go way above and beyond the managerial position, and that's something that Martin's going to have to contend with.
What are they?
It's a club that's a kind of a monument to short-termism. We've had 10 managers in 8 years. We've had numerous, directors of football and heads of recruitment, and a huge turnover in players. We've had 3 owners in the last 9 years. And this is all geared towards getting the club back to where it considers its rightful place, which is in the Premier League. But it hasn't been in the Premier League for 20 years. It's a big club by reputation, but it's not a big club by current or recent performance. And the suspicion is that the owners will throw money and throw big decisions at the problem until it eventually comes off. And actually, the Championship has shown in recent years that it takes a bit more than that. It takes a bit more nous. It takes a bit more faith and patience and savviness. And that's not something that Forest have had over the last few years.
There seems to be a suggestion that the board wasn't all that happy with Karanka's style of football there, which had to make us, certainly a lot of us, obviously being fresh from the calamity that was the Ireland style of football over the last few years. But what do you make of that?
Yeah, it's certainly a concern, and it's absolutely right. It was one of the owner's most prevalent concerns was that Karanka's style of football was not what it was. It should be said that Aitor Karanka was very well backed in the transfer market, and that he did suffer a number of pretty humbling defeats, particularly at home. And I know the owners looked at the likes of Norwich and Leeds, and they reckoned that Nottingham Forest had a stronger squad than both of those teams, and they're probably right. But yeah, Martin O'Neill is going to have to change certainly what he was doing at Ireland in the last 2 years in charge, because if they want to see expansive football, then that's really not his forte. It should also be said that the style of football becomes a pretty handy excuse when results aren't going right. If Martin O'Neill wins his first 7 or 8 games in charge, very quickly the concerns about the football, I'm sure, will die down. But yeah, we're not going to see the expansive football that Evangelos Marinakis has demanded from previous managers. That's pretty certain. Kev,
this reminds me a bit of Kenny Dalglish getting the Liverpool job, in that there was so much emotion involved, and it was like nostalgia laden. And I think, as somebody for a sauce of Liverpool, I really wanted to work, and maybe it didn't work in the end, but certainly I would be very, very sceptical about O'Neill's suitability for club management at this stage of his career.
Well, I don't know. I think his club record in England, certainly at lower level, is excellent. And again, Daniel's touched on something there. It was a long time ago when he managed over in England, when he's managed at club level there. But in general, he has got an excellent record. And I think if you look at what he did at Wycombe, what he did at Leicester, in getting them both promoted out of lower leagues into the next division above, and then, of course, securing Leicester as a Premier League club, I think that's something that certainly goes in his favour. The one thing I wanted just to ask Daniel was in relation to Martin O'Neill's relationship with Ellis Short at Sunderland. It seems to me like the ownership of Forest is quite similar to that of Sunderland, where there's actually a little bit more hands-on approach actually from Forest than there was at Sunderland. But how's that relationship going to work? How do you think Martin O'Neill is going to handle that type of I don't know, maybe hothead, I think, as well, because as you say, with the amount of changes that he's made, he does make decisions maybe quite rashly, I think, at times as well.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out that Evangelos Marinakis was the only person that our previous owner, Fawaz Al-Hassawi, would sell to, and I think that speaks volumes. The club have put a better structure in place. There is middlemen between owner and manager. There is a chairman who is more hands-on, and the club are doing a lot more than they ever used to under Al-Hassawi to bring the fans close to the club. You can tell that in the attendances. Most home games are sellouts. But yes, one of the slight leaks from the Karanka camp post his sacking was that he felt that there was undue pressure from Marinakis to particularly play Arvin Appiah, a young winger who the club have high hopes for. And Karanka thought that there was pressure to play him, and he didn't play him that much, and that was viewed to be a part of the reason he was sacked. Yeah, he left the club.
But he is Martin O'Neill, very, very strong character. So if that sort of relationship, or if Martin O'Neill is being told who he should be playing, then you can only see it going one way from the off, can't you?
You can, although it should be said that perhaps that strength of character is what an owner like Marinakis needs. Yeah. I don't think there's any doubt that they've appointed Martin O'Neill because of his history at Forest. Now, that goes without saying. The statement the club released today said, we want him. He's one of our miracle men, and we want him to get us back and try and achieve that miracle again. To me, that's it's incredibly fanciful. We've seen the Leicester dream over the last few years, but Nottingham Forest are not going to do that. What we need to do is move forward sustainably and potentially slowly to get where we feel we should be, which is basically a bottom half Premier League team. O'Neill might well be the man for that, but to appoint someone on their previous history, that slightly sticks in my throat, because I think we need to appoint a manager who is focused purely on the job in hand and forget everything else. O'Neill might well be the man for that job, but we need to do it on that rather than anything else. And to my mind, the club have appointed him because it's a good PR thing to do. They think the fans will get on side. The last guy did it with Stuart Pearce, and that worked badly. Stuart Pearce had enough about him and with his reputation that it was never going to be dampened by what happened at Forest. I'm not sure O'Neill does, so this kind of needs to work for both.
You spoke about PR there, because O'Neill, has probably been on a bit of a PR offensive since he got let go from the Ireland job, and his reputation over here was very badly bruised by, also rumours just about kind of maybe a lack of preparation for teams Ireland were playing against, but also the fact that he'd really, basically inculcated in the team a system or a belief that they couldn't play football. But we have the impression over here that he's been on maybe something of a charm offensive with English journalists, and maybe his reputation over there is slightly loftier still.
I think it probably is loftier here, and speaking to a number of supporters today, it's certainly loftier amongst Nottingham Forest supporters than it would be at any other club in our position, I think. He does have the advantage that he has a very large, strong squad that's pretty top heavy with attackers. So if he can bring a solidity to the defence and kind of let the attack do their thing, then maybe that works. But as you say, he's got to do an awful lot from the last 2 years at Ireland to change the perception of a kind of dour safety first manager, because that's exactly what the accusation was that Aitor Karanka was. Yeah,
you mentioned the squad there as well, and so there's one or two familiar names that we would recognise. Daryl Murphy will be one that we would recognise of here instantly. But what about the rest of the squad then in general? Do you think that squad is capable of having a serious challenge then for a top six, top two maybe beyond them just now, but certainly top six before the end of the season? I'm sure that's Martin O'Neill's remit now.
Yeah, and it should be. There's a whole host of central midfielders. Jack Colback's got Premier League experience. Claudio Jacob has. Adlin Guediora has. Ben Watson has. There's plenty in central midfield. They signed 3 Portuguese players last summer, one of which, João Carvalho, cost £15 million. The other 2 are on loan deals with potential permanent signings at the end of the season if they go up. As well as Daryl Murphy, they've got Lewis Graben, who's one of the top scorers in the division. There is still, the influence of the youth academy, which, despite everything and despite Forest's best efforts, has continued to flourish in recent years. And they've got some decent central defenders, but from the outside, it looks a bloated squad, and it looks a squad that was low on motivation.
And that's one thing. In fairness to O'Neill, you can imagine there'll be a very quick return in terms of he will get them firing again.
Yeah, and all the talk is that Roy Keane will perhaps unsurprisingly, given his relationship with O'Neill and his history at Forest, will come in as assistant, and they do strike as a kind of bad cop duo. So yes, there will be heads banged together in that changing room. And again, speaking to supporters, some think that might well be the best thing for them, because there's plenty of talent in that squad.
I just find this very perplexing, though. So both of their reputations were so badly dented by the Irish thing, possibly Keane even more than O'Neill, and yet Forest seemingly think it's a good idea to put what would be deemed a failed managerial duo back at it, but it's still a relatively big club. I don't know, Kev. I think it's a gamble.
It's the history of the club, though, isn't it? Simply, Roy Keane himself has been linked with that job several times in the last 10 years. I think.
But his managerial currency's in bits at the moment.
Well, yes. Yes, well, maybe you say that, but I think there are still people willing to take a chance on that character, that name. It's still a huge name within the world of football. We know that, and that's what a lot of owners, a lot of people within clubs do see that as maybe something that Daniel's touched on there. It's a huge PR coup for Forest, essentially, to get O'Neill and particularly getting Roy Keane in alongside him. That's the way it is. Again, you say his reputation could have been damaged over. It probably was. It has been damaged here, but over there, his reputation is still as high as ever.
What will the reaction be at the City Ground when, you have your first game against Wigan and you have potentially these two guys coming in? You just imagine there's this groundswell of emotion.
Yeah, there will be. We all remember Stuart Pearce's homecoming, and it won't be as emotional as that. But it will be the club, when they tweeted out their statement, did it with the hashtag Welcome Home Martin. So they're very much trying to capture that sense of homecoming, and they do honestly believe that swell of goodwill might give Forest an initial bump that they need to get back in the playoff picture. And I think they probably look at something like, it's a very different situation, but something like Solskjaer at Manchester United. And Karanka's exit has very much has links to Jose Mourinho's exit, in that there was a sense that the players weren't really playing for him, and that everyone had kind of accepted this sort of mediocrity of performance. And I think they probably hope for the same, that someone can come in with a bit of history at the club, can say, look, you know what this club should be doing, you know how we can play, you know how you can play, let's just go out there and do it. Now, I don't think O'Neill is as tactically ambitious and open as Solskjaer, but if he gives the same message, then, it's easy to see how potentially quite quickly it could snowball.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, has the game passed him by to an extent? You've Bielsa now doing his thing in that division. You mentioned Wickham and Leicester. That's a long time ago,
Yeah, it's probably true, but I think he's certainly his history in the game. I mean, I'd be one more of, look, if you've got it and you have done it in the past, then there is still certainly a job in the game for you. Whether or not the Forest job has been a difficult job over a number of years now. If you can get it turned around, we know Forest as a huge club should be, or essentially, there's a number of clubs that think they probably Leeds and Norwich and West Brom, I suppose, as well, that think the Premier League clubs. Forest are in that bracket. Sheffield Wednesday is another one. So I think in general they're a huge club. Martin O'Neill gives them the bounce and they get rocking straight away. Who's to say that they can't go on and do that? I wouldn't rule it out. I think that's harsh to say, John, myself, to say that the game's passed him by.
I'm just potentially.
No, I just think in general, I think there is still a place for him. I do think that. Given what he's done in the past, I think sometimes, yes, it did go very, very sour here, and we know that. It was everything went sour about the performances, about the lack of goals, particularly the home performance. We weren't getting any spark at the Aviva at all. But his reputation is still, I would think, very, very good. I feel it's very, very good. And he's got a history of getting sides who are in lesser positions, certainly in higher leagues. That's his reputation. That's what he's done.
It does, Daniel, look a perfect fit for O'Neill at the moment. Obviously, he was linked with Stoke. Personally, I would have been a little bit surprised if he got a Premier League job. This couldn't basically be the best option available to him, and perfect in so many ways.
Yeah, and it's also worth saying that with the kind of the ownership, not debacle is the wrong word, but the kind of uneasiness and upheaval around the club, and this kind of, as I say, monument to short-termism, it's worth pointing out that if it does go badly and goes badly quickly, there is a fairly handy excuse there with the situation at Forest, that O'Neill would very reasonably be able to say, well, exactly as Karanka will, and say, look, I'm still a good manager. It just didn't work in that position because of the situation the club was in at that point. And if that happens, I think he needed a championship job. He needed a championship job, and he needed a club down on its luck that he could take forward. But I think Forest is good for him, because if it doesn't work out, he's got a kind of handy, well, look, if you give me the right tools and the right situation, I still can do a job.
Yeah, I just wanted to go to you on that point there, Daniel, in relation to Karanka. Karanka was 7th in the table. Was it about a month ago now? The suggestion was that, look, he's not in the top 6. He's under serious pressure. Now, I know there was another more element, or a number of elements around that. But if Martin O'Neill is falling mid-table, or he's not necessarily getting the results, will he be given this season? Is it a long-term plan, or just a short-term fix for him to go into the club now?
I don't think anything has been a long-term plan over the last 7-8 years. We've had too many managers for that, and it's happened too often that there can be no coincidence that it affects those managers. I think what they're searching for is a manager who can get that new manager bounce and hopefully capture something, and they see O'Neill with his history as the perfect person to do that. But no, I think it would be very ambitious and optimistic to say this is a long-term decision, simply because we've not had one of those since, the last manager to last more than a calendar year was Billy Davies. And that, to me, that feels half a lifetime ago.
Yeah, you get the sense just talking from you there that you're obviously kind of deeply emotionally invested in the club, but also you're kind of a little bit battle weary at this stage, and maybe thinking that O'Neill might be, painting the car a nice colour, but the car has a slightly dodgy engine in terms of where it's been going.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. It should to say it's a fairly expensive car. There's a lot of money been spent on this squad, so if someone can get it motoring, then there's a great deal of potential there, and there's a huge amount of potential at Forest. As I say, we're selling out home games as verging on nearly 30,000 every week at the City Ground. So there's certainly potential there, and what the new owners have done with the structure of the club, they have got a good mood behind there. It's just we need to see that reflected in some managerial long-termism, really. So
if the last question was, if it was kind of like a gun to your head, how long will Mark O'Neill be at Forest?
Less than 18 months, but that doesn't necessarily reflect.
That's long term nowadays.
Yeah, it is.
Daniel, thanks a million.
Thank you.
That was Daniel Storey. We'll go to the ads now.
Football on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Boyle Sports. Now with same-day withdrawals to your Visa debit card.
The minimum wage? Of course it should be higher. But higher wages could make it tougher for businesses. Then again, doesn't everyone deserve a fair wage? But if you increase it, do you have to increase wages for more experienced staff? It's about having a decent standard of living and keeping Ireland competitive too. Every year, the Low Pay Commission makes recommendations to the government on the national minimum wage. Right now, we want as many opinions as possible to present a truly balanced view. Visit lowpaycommission.ie before February 9th and have your say on the minimum wage.
A business needs to be creative to stay ahead of the game. And creative brains need space to think. Give them space. Think better. But let's do it with a little style. Castleknock means business. Discover more at castleknockhotel.com.
Discover all new design, all new technology, and an all new level of performance. The all new BMW 3 Series, arriving March 2019. Rediscover every hairpin turn and rugged road with Adaptive M suspension. Or enjoy unprecedented control and entertainment on Irish motorways with the all-new Advanced Intelligent Assistant. Reserve your all-new BMW 3 Series now at discoverbmw.ie.
January. It may feel dull and dreary. It may feel like ages till payday. But at least the January sale is on at appliancesdelivered.ie. And if it's bargains you're after, it's bargains you'll get. With up to 15% off TVs, 25% off washing machines, 25% off refrigeration, and up to 30% off dishwashers. Make January great again, at least for a few hours. And check out our health and wellness range. The January sale, now on at appliancesdelivered.ie.
It's not all fun and games being the dog in this family. The excuses I get when it's time for a run. It's lashing out. The beach is miles away. The dog ate the car keys. They've got nothing to worry about. They've got AA car insurance. They can drive any car. Newsflash for you, listen to me. I only ate the keyring. And I'd do it again.
With AA car insurance, our members get fully comprehensive insurance to drive other cars too. Go to the AA.ie. Who's got clever car insurance? Excludes value product. Acceptance criteria, terms and conditions apply. AA Ireland Limited Trading as AA Insurance is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
We're born curious. Curious about the world around us, and curious to find out what we can become. We ask questions and seek answers, constantly challenging ourselves to think bigger, go further, learn more. Because when we open our minds and let loose our imaginations, the scope of what we can achieve is limitless. Find your degree at ucd.ie/CAO, Ireland's #1 university for graduate employability. UCD, think bigger.
Look and feel great for less this new year. At Louis Copeland, there's up to 50% off casual wear and suits. Let the Louis Copeland family look after your family. Shop in store or at louiscopeland.com.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
And you are welcome back. Full time in Blackburn Newcastle. That's 2-2. So that was actually quite a dramatic game.
It's a good game, wasn't it? I enjoyed it actually. Did enjoy it.
2-0 up very early, Newcastle, and
Darragh Lenihan as well scoring for Newcastle. Sorry, for Blackburn tonight as well, which was great. Great news. Been a good weekend for Irish scorers, or a good few days actually.
It has. You mentioned one of them before the show, Declan Rice, the first teenager scoring the league for West Ham in the guts of a decade or so.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, isn't it? It's amazing considering that West Ham have this history of, producing players in the right manner, and you expect. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that he was the first teenager to score for them in over 10 years. I think it was. Yeah.
Is there anything more depressing though than like the son of a player you remember very well and you were actually played with?
Yeah, Tyrese Campbell scored 2 goals for Stoke tonight. Son of
Kevin Campbell.
Kevin Campbell. When Cams was at Everton, when I was there, what a brilliant footballer, brilliant man Kev was. Amazing teammate actually, and his son used to be around the training ground. He used to come to games, come in the changing room before the matches and afterwards, and kick a ball around. It's amazing.
Unbelievable. I don't know, we're obviously all getting old, but he looks a player of immense promise as well.
Well, yeah, he scored a few goals. He got in the side back end of last season, I think it was. So he did play a few Premier League matches. I was involved in a few Premier League matches as well. So just getting game time. Probably for him personally, getting relegated might be a good thing for him, so we can get some more games under his belt this season. But yeah, he was substituted in the end by James McLean. Actually came on for him. They've actually just equalised Shrewsbury, so they're under a bit of pressure actually, Stoke, and I think the new manager going in there as well into Stoke, taking over from Gary Rowett, Nathan Jones from Luton, who Luton have done great over the last while. So yeah, bit of pressure. But anyway, yeah, Shrewsbury have equalised. But yeah, Tyrese is on the mark tonight. Yeah.
Yeah. So Shrewsbury 2-2 at Stoke, Luton 0, Sheffield Wednesday 1, and Blackburn 2-2 versus Newcastle, which is a full time. Unfortunately, we don't have time to talk about Declan Rice for the rest of the year because Rob Harris of Global Football and a sports writer at the Associated Press is to probably talk about the only thing more important than who Declan Rice declares for, and that is Brexit. Where are we going with this, Rob? Not Declan Rice, Brexit.
Well, I was at Saturday's game to see him actually score the goal, so...
so you just want to talk about Declan Rice?
Yeah, I was there too as well, Rob. I saw you across the press room at one stage.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not being put to a vote. I mean, obviously it might come down differently in different countries, but it's a busy one with Brexit.
Yeah, obviously we expected the vote as it happened this evening, but I'm very interested in the ramifications for this. I know we're kind of prisoners to speculation in terms of work permits and even Irish players going across, but what's the general understanding in football in terms of obviously something that's more important than that, but in the football family, what are the worries at the moment in Britain?
Well, I mean, from the FA's perspective, it's always been seen as a chance that they didn't seize or didn't back necessarily politically to actually try to help the national teams, obviously get more English players into them. And from the Premier League side, it's completely different because Richard Scudamore, when he was there still as chairman, he actively said that Britain should remain.
And obviously we expect what happened tonight, but if there were potentially a no-deal Brexit, and if this did go sort of gung-ho into it, what could this kind of bring English football back in terms of the massive globalisation steps it's made in recent years, such that I guess you've the voter who would have maybe represented what Neil Warnock said the other day, but then you've the reality of Cardiff City with their Malaysian backing and multitude of non-English players.
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously quite noteworthy, Warnock speaking out so stridently and vociferously, and some, might say, and some would say, offensively on Brexit. What perhaps that indicated, as amongst many things, was actually how much an echo chamber things like Twitter can be at a time, because Twitter was actually pretty much against Warnock, but probably the last bit of his statement was what most would find offensive, and particularly saying to hell with the world, particularly given the reliance of the Premier League on the world, not only from bringing players in but also the international TV money as well, and ownership, as you see at Cardiff with Malaysian owners. And obviously from one point of view, the government have tried to say that actually Brexit is an opportunity to bring more business in from around the world, not just from Europe in particular, and actually, be far more sort of looking out around the world. And of course, the Premier League is actually one of the big cultural exports of Britain, and the fact that the government uses it as a sort of extension of soft power. But the Premier League would argue that potentially the way the FA want to change the rules on terms of the number of foreign players could actually harm the league.
Do you know what, Rob? It does actually make it all the more remarkable, his comments like that, given the different nationalities that's in his squad, given obviously it's not a British owner of his own football club, given the amount of foreign owners that's in the Premier League now, and you just touched on it there as well. The globalisation of Premier League football. We know it's the biggest league in world football. We know the attraction. We only need to look at the figures. Watching that City-Liverpool game last week, where they were saying it could have been up to around about 1 billion people watching that game. It's amazing where you're using a press conference like that, because we know what happens in these press conferences and how big these stories become. I couldn't believe Neil Warnock's comments and how, considering again his owners and the opportunities that's been afforded to him at that club.
Like Cardiff obviously disassociated themselves, Rob, as you'd expect, but did Warnock sort of epitomise perhaps an uneducated view and a kind of a naive pseudo-patriotic view when it came to the Brexit voter in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, the things that struck me most about it was the fact that it came obviously after a 0-0 draw. It didn't come after some crushing defeat when he was down in the dumps and was furious over a load of bad decisions. And it was actually in response to a question about whether Brexit would make it harder to sign players. And if you pull apart his statement, first of all, it's obviously a surprise that any manager is speaking out so strongly on Brexit, but you've had Jurgen Klopp, who's actually spoken on the opposite side, which he can't understand why anyone would want to break off from Europe. So obviously it's quite welcome. We can't deny managers the chance to talk about politics. On the flip side, I remember being in France during Euro 2016, and Harry Kane was asked about Brexit, and he said he didn't really know anything, so didn't care. But you had players from Germany and Italy who were actually giving their own opinions and speaking out quite thoughtfully. So, but if you go back on what Warnock actually said, part of it was actually a legitimate opinion for many people to
absolutely
that voiced by parts of the country, saying don't know why they don't get on with it. Which doesn't get on with it, and they had a referendum, and now it's basically time to be implemented, and he can't wait to get out. Well, that is a point of view which, based on the referendum result, 52% of the country backed something along those lines at the time. It was obviously the final part at the end, which caused so much surprise, to hell with the rest of the world, given the fact that obviously the government has actually made a point of actually it's a global Britain that Brexit leads to.
Kev, we spoke about romantically a bit the loss of the FA Cup earlier, but is there any sense in England of the loss of the English game, in the sense of the influx of foreigners has been so great that teams have probably sort of lost a local identity in many respects? Well, that maybe some older people or more traditionalists would say, well, actually Brexit might be a bad thing in some respects. Yeah,
I don't know in relation to the game. I know that Rob's touching it there. 52% of the public have voted that that's what they want anyway. Rob's also touched on something in relation to something that we've spoken about ourselves. How many Irish players are we getting breaking through at Premier League level now?
Bugger all.
That's obviously going away. England are having their own problems, and Scotland and Wales are having their own problems at getting players playing at elite level. And Rob's touched on it there, that so many would view this as a way to get more English players, more homegrown players into the squads of Premier League sides. That's the way that I would see it, and potentially it could be. The only thing I would maybe ask Rob there as well, do you think, is there any sort of plan in place what the Premier League have put in place in relation to EU players? I know we know it is difficult enough for players outside the EU to get work permits, and they've got to meet a certain criteria to play. But in relation to EU players, and of course we'll have this ourselves over here in Ireland, will there be a limit on the amount of EU players that one particular side can have, or will we go on as normal for the time being?
No, well as things stand, obviously there's free movement of players from Europe into Premier League clubs, and if you're from outside of the EU or EEA, because it includes Switzerland as well, you have to meet those requirements in terms of international appearances and which sort of level of international team you played for. It was actually a few years ago that Greg Dyke got those rules strengthened to actually, make it harder for players from outside Europe to come to play in England. Now, as things stand, the FA runs that visa system. So if there's any appeals in terms of against the visa decision, the FA has the final say. That's why the FA has said to the Premier League, look, we need to come up with a post-Brexit way of doing things. And they looked at the numbers of how many foreign players were in the Premier League. They divided it they did the average divided by 20, and it basically worked out at 13 per team at the moment. So they said, well, let's lock it in and say each Premier League squad then can have 13 non-homegrown players, and that would allow them to sign any 13 non-homegrown players. So you could sign someone from the lowest ranked country in the world who's never even played for his national team, and you wouldn't need to meet those requirements. So the FA says, well, it gives you the freedom, if you adopt our rules, to sign any foreign player you want. But the Premier League don't want anything that disrupts the league. Obviously, they would like something that maintained the status quo. And I'm surprised it probably hasn't been voiced more often, the argument, the fact that, the Premier League is ultimately part of a European ecosystem. Teams qualify for the Champions League and the Europa League. So why not let English clubs be able to sign into the Premier League however many European players they want, because they're part of those same competitions, and try to maintain a status quo like that. But no, the FA are determined to use this as a chance to increase the number of foreign players. I mean, it was actually while in Dublin at the start of December for the Euro 2020 qualifying draw that we discovered that it was about the previous weekend that the lowest ever number of homegrown players had been in Premier League teams, like less than 25%, and that was used while in Dublin as a chance for the FA, in particular Southgate, to advance just why they need more homegrown players. But Southgate himself is actually against the quota system, even though his bosses at the FA are actually trying to introduce it.
Yeah, and in 2016, all 20 Premier League clubs voted against Brexit. But where do you ultimately see it going, Kev? Nobody knows the answer.
Well, no, they don't. I mean, essentially, how can Rob touched on something there? Look, we're part of UEFA. Essentially, we play in the European competitions. Why should that change? But there will come a time. Well, I would think in the next couple of years, if and when Brexit does happen, that players will have to adhere to different criteria than what they would have had to in the past, and this could lead to problems. It may lead to more homegrown players. Where will it see our lads? I don't know where it's going to see our lads in relation to going over, because we've had so many players that have gone across the course of time over there, and some have obviously done well, some haven't. But ultimately, I think there will be a huge change. I think there's going to be a huge shift if this does happen, yeah.
Very briefly, Rob, how do you see it panning out, I suppose, in terms of a brief kind of pro and con for English football if this goes on as it looks like it might?
Yeah, I mean, from the previous point, it's going to be hard to maintain the free movement of European players, just because obviously one of the key points of Brexit to so many people who advocate that point is an end to free movement across Europe. So, I mean, it has gone quieter. I mean, Premier League are going through a leadership void at the moment with the exit of Scudamore and his replacement, Susanna Dinnish, then turning down the job she accepted. So, on the Premier League side, they're currently going through problems themselves. But I mean, ultimately, if the Premier League does not accept the FA's deal, the FA are pretty much insistent that, well, we currently control the visa system for foreign players. So every foreign signing potentially in coming up post Brexit would have to abide by those those visa requirements that are in place at the moment. But obviously, so much depends on, of course, whether Brexit is delayed, and obviously discussions over a second referendum still, which obviously the government is against. So so much uncertainty that so many often say, well, how important is it to the government to discuss sporting implications, and they sort of leave it to the FA at times, and the FA via the Premier League.
Thanks very much for that, Rob. We'll go to the ads.
Off the Ball on News Talk.
I will never see my wife and daughter again.
Unaccompanied learners can lead to unaccompanied lives. And now the law has changed. Gardaí have the power to seize a vehicle driven by an unaccompanied learner. What's more, the owner of the vehicle faces prosecution and a fine of up to €1,000. Don't drive unaccompanied, and never loan a car to an unaccompanied or unlicensed driver. From the Road Safety Authority, visit rsa.ie to see Noel Clancy's story.
Football Index is reinventing football betting. You can buy and sell the world's top players. Their value may go up and down, but it's not over with the final whistle like a regular bet. Football Index, reinventing football betting.
Start building your portfolio today at footballindex.co.uk or download the app now. New customers only, minimum deposit and conditions apply. Gamble responsibly.
At Sky, we're on a mission to thank our loyal customers. So, we've assembled a crack team of actors, sports pundits and comedians. OK, guys, ready? 3, 2...
Thanks, guys.
1.
Thank you.
Oh, a bit early, Jamie.
I thought we were going on one.
Who goes on one? It's always after one.
Idris, one more time.
You know what, guys? Forget it. We haven't even got to the reward stuff. Amelia, could you just finish off the ad, please?
Love to. Sky VIP, your loyalty programme. Rewarding you for your time with us. Sky. Believe in better.
Shane Byrne here to tell you about the Rugby Legends match at the RDS on February 1st. Join me and an array of Lions, Grand Slam, World Cup winners as we raise funds for rugby-related charities, including My Name is Doddy Foundation, aiding research into motor neuron disease. It could be your last chance to see some rugby grades like Gordon Darcy, Mick Galway, Mike Tyndall, Josh Lucy battle it out on the field. Rugby Legends at the RDS, 7 p.m, February 1st. Tickets available on ticketmaster.ie. #RugbyLegends.
January. It may feel dull and dreary. It may feel like ages till payday. But at least the January sale is on at appliancesdelivered.ie. And if it's bargains you're after, it's bargains you'll get. With up to 15% off TVs, 25% off washing machines, 25% off refrigeration, and up to 30% off dishwashers. Make January great again, at least for a few hours. And check out our health and wellness range. The January sale, now on at appliancesdelivered.ie.
Stay with me, my love. I hope you'll always be right here by my side if ever I need you. Oh, my love, I will follow you if you follow me.
Wherever you go, Bank of Ireland. Bank of Ireland is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Off the Ball. This is News Talk.
Tomorrow night we're going to have a specially extended Wednesday night rugby live from Garryowen in association with Heineken Rugby Club, and we'll be previewing Munster's 6th round Heineken Champions Cup clash with Exeter this weekend in the company of some Garryowen, Ireland and Lions legends, including Ellie O'Sullivan, Tony Ward and David Wallace. It's the latest Off the Ball roadshow in association with Heineken Rugby Club. Richie's up next. He's in for Tom Dunn. Off the Ball AM is back across our social channels from 7:45 AM tomorrow morning. Thanks to Kev for coming in tonight, and he will be back in studio with Nathan tomorrow night for the football show, and we'll chat to you then.